Okay, so I've been wanting to make this video for a few days, and the reason that I was looking at kind of pushing myself to put this out there um, is because what I found for myself is that it's now time to start speaking out about things that you have walked through yourself and kind of like my own self-delusions and all the excuses that I would give myself for not standing up in our world and actually starting to change things. Because I mean, most of us can look around and you'll even see within yourself on a daily basis like some level of anxiety or some level of stress or something that doesn't seem to be in line with the idea that you're supposed to really be enjoying yourself within your life. And most people experience a lot of suffering. But most of us who have access to the internet right now, or who are able to watch this video right now, that's not what you experience. You experience very low level anxiety and pressure, which you may experience as a lot, right? But the reason I wanted to talk about this now and kind of speak up about it is because the other day we were driving on the freeway and we saw an accident. I was with the kids in the car and we saw an accident where the person in the accident died. And their body was right there in the car. And it was just really interesting because everyone around was driving very slow and kind of watching. And it was sort of like this glitch for a moment where everyone got to kind of see and remember death for a moment and remember the suffering that is actually existent in life. Because that person who got into that car accident right in front of us went through a lot of suffering in that moment. They experienced a lot of suffering and they died right there in front of all of us. And it's like interesting because there are people in this world, and maybe even you've done this too, I've done it in the past, who will say that life is a game. And usually it's for two reasons that we'll say this. One reason is because our economic system, our social system that's currently in our world is a game. And it's a game where some are pre-programmed in this world. They're born into this world in a position where they're more likely to win. They're more likely to have more money. They're more likely to just have this sort of ability to go out and build a network and connect with people so that they can have money and have more of this kind of good feeling in their life. And they use the idea of life as a game to justify why some people in this world get to experience what they would consider happiness and bliss and other people don't. And you'll see this. There's lots of, self-help gurus out there who will, claim that, you just have to buck it up and suck it up and buck up and suck it up and just create happiness within your own life. And on some level, when we're talking about our economic system and our social system, there are certain ways that you can support yourself to learn how those systems work and to support yourself to start to win in those systems. But the problem is, if you're only doing it in self-interest, you're still creating a point where you're dependent on someone else to suffer in that game, to lose in that game. Now, an important point is if you're listening to people who are saying life is a game from that perspective, a really important point is to really investigate those people and investigate what their actual daily life is like, because they're not experiencing all of this happiness and all this stuff that they're claiming that you're going to get from buying their system or doing whatever they're talking about, whether it's diet or working out or whatever it is, because those are all part of our social system. or whatever investment program or all this kind of stuff that's part of our economic system, if it still requires other people to lose, then you should go and investigate. Really find out. Don't just listen to people because they're saying particular words that you have programmed into you to give you a happy feeling, and then you just accept what they're saying is true. You should really go and investigate. Find out if what they're talking about has any flaws, right? Has any parts where it still requires other people to lose. Because that means that at some point, if you do something wrong in that system, like for example, in the economic system, if you don't follow along with the economic system and you do something that's not in line with that and you lose everything, you know, if you lost all your money within that, like I just read a story the other day of this guy who, murdered his whole family, like living in a Disney World neighborhood or something like that because he was $100,000 in debt, and he was trying to game the economic system or something like that just to make money, game the Medicaid system. So he killed his whole family. And of course they went through massive suffering through that. So go and investigate, find out, because there's lots of people who say life is a game, but they're just talking about really the economic system and the social system. And we should all ask ourselves, is it possible for us to change those things? Can we change the economic system? Can we change the social system? Why do those things exist? Why does our social system exist so that some get to win and most get to lose? Why does our economic system establish such that, and our money system such that just a very few people get to win in this world and most lose, and most are in poverty in our world? Because poverty is something that like we could abolish today. It could happen immediately. Like we could put programs into place now that would make sure that everyone has their basic needs met and no one is a slave and no one is suffering and no one is wondering where they're going to get their next meal, and no child is born into a family where they are just basically destined to suffer. And we just tell them, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you'll be, that's your point in life to figure out. Now, the other interesting group of people who will say that life is a game are the people who are completely, totally deluded in this idea that suffering is necessary and like a lesson in life, and that you should just kind of like focus on the positive things in your world, and if you're focusing on the problems, then you're not going to be able to come up with a solution, right? I've seen that come up, and it's like, for a long time, I have, for myself, wanted to avoid conflict. And I'm sure that you experience that as well. So anyone on here who's ever thought of making a video or speaking up when you're talking to someone and you can see they're in a total delusion, but you're concerned about creating conflict, that's something that it takes practice to push through, which is really cool about making these videos or going into groups where you actually speak up, because you get to test the information that you're talking about. You actually get to check your own clarity on that point. And you also get to push through this massive resistance to conflict that will come up. So for me, it's like I keep seeing these points come up of people in my environment who are talking about how life is a game and really you should focus on love and you should focus on this good, positive feeling that you have in your world. And, sometimes that can be supportive if you're totally fucking depressed and apathetic and you just need to get yourself off the couch. But the reality is, some people in this world are focused on the problems, right? And they're utilizing those problems in order to make money, right? So for those people who are sitting around like proposing that we all just focus on, don't focus on the suffering in this world, or the people who are suffering in this world are going to get to a better life after they die, right? Like they're learning a lesson. Let them learn their lesson in life. That is such a fucking deluded idea. And it just creates this point where none of us are going to stand up and actually stop poverty, like stop suffering. Like children on a daily basis are being sold into the sex trade all over this world. And that is being supported by the economic system that we live in. And so this point of like, just focus on the positive, focus on the heart, the love that comes, in your life, and just focus on that and don't focus on the problems. The reality is we all have to focus on the problems. And the more we focus on the problems and support one another to understand how the system works in our world and why people are suffering, instead of just seeing it as something that's like sort of like a God-given predestination, is that you're just going to, some people will suffer and some people will do great, and some people just have to experience, terrible things in their life, and some don't, and hopefully they'll learn from it. It's like no child deserves to experience rape. No child deserves to go hungry. And this is not a point of just speaking about these things with no solution. Go and investigate what we're doing with TechnoTutor. We are focused on the solution. We are focused on creating a world where people are properly educated to the point where you can actually feel empathy for another person, like real empathy for another person who's going through suffering in our world, to the point, not just so that you can get a guilty feeling from it or so that you can feel good about your own life, so that you can actually create a solution to the problem of why people are suffering in this world, right? Because right now we have a bunch of people all in their own little bubbles. And I'm sure you've experienced this for yourself. I have, right? Where I'm just focused on my own self-interest. And it's like, but there's a point where we all depend on one another to create in this world. And if you're suffering, the reality is that opens up the potential for me to suffer, right? Depending on who's in power in this world, who has the most money in this world, we have to create a point where we become unified with each other and we take responsibility for what we're creating in this world. Even if you feel like you have no power, even if you feel like you just have no ability to change, the first thing you have to do is start with yourself. And that thought, that belief that you are not powerful, that you don't have any ability to change anything in this world. And that's why I suggest investigate what we're doing with TechnoTutor. And really, if you're at that point where you can't even get off the couch, like you can't even stop yourself from watching Netflix, or you can't even stop yourself from yelling at your kids, or you don't even see why that's bad, I would highly recommend that you go and investigate Destiny, because that is the tool through which we can all support ourselves to actually figure out why we're experiencing all this anxiety and depression and why we can't think properly. That's what we're doing in TechnoTutor too. We're supporting ourselves to figure out why we can't think properly and how we can support children from a very young age to be able to structure their vocabulary effectively so that they can read and think effectively. And it's been a really cool point for me. I've been walking a 10-year process of this whole point. And you know what? I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about it. It's not about what you think about it. It's like, I know for certain that I have changed so much in my ability to process information and in my ability to regulate and direct myself to the point where I'm not experiencing anxiety anymore. I'm not experiencing depression, even though I went through massive depression when I was in my early 20s and massive anxiety to the point where I just didn't want to even answer the phone because I was so anxious, right? So why am I sharing that? Because most gurus who are sitting around talking to you about this stuff won't actually give you the real tools. They won't actually support you to be able to direct yourself. It's still all about getting someone else to coach you and getting someone else to kind of hold back things from you, right? And you need to be able to direct yourself. That's what I've learned to do. and it's taken a long time, and it's been a process. But at this point in my life, I'm ready now to be able to stand up and speak out about what I can clearly see is a problem, right? So like, for example, in the US, why do we have anyone who is not making enough money to be able to pay their rent? Like, why is any child suffering? Why do we have this massive school system that just creates like all of these bullies and conflict and just leaves us with kids who can't even read effectively? Like, these are the major problems in our world. We can make a list and sit down and solve it if we aren't all caught up in our own personal delusion that life is just a game, because it's not a game. And if anyone says that to you, that life is a game, really investigate and question them. Because you know that person who's sitting around talking about how, oh, everything's light and love. I only experience bliss and happiness all the time. You know that person, you know that they're experiencing that point where they're sitting on a toilet trying to push out a shit, and they're having to go to the grocery store and buy food, and they're concerned about paying bills. I mean, you know it, because if you're going through that point, they are too, because all of us have that shared experience, right? Except for the people in this world who have a shit ton of money, right? So really investigate when you see things online of someone talking about life is just a game. Like, really investigate, really question, really find out, and then ask them, challenge them, find out what they're actually going through, and don't be afraid of words. Really investigate the words that person is existing as. Where are they allowing themselves to avoid the real problems in this world? Where are they allowing themselves to avoid the internal conflict that you know is existing within them because it exists within you? So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that, because it's like, it's time for us all to stop just existing as this like mediocre existence, especially us who have access to these platforms right now, because our life is comfortable, and yet we still experience a lot of stress and pressure. And don't you wonder why? Jordan Peterson made a really good point about this, how a lot of people who end up on SSRIs, or like antidepressants and anti-anxiety and medications and stuff, it's usually because their life is actually pretty decent. If you were to look at like the basic problems in their life, they're actually pretty simple, straightforward. So it's like, you take this medication because you have to turn off that part of yourself that's still like sending up a red flag of something's not right. Something's not right. Something is not right in this world. And you know what that red flag is because you can look around and see suffering on a daily basis. You can drive down the street going to the grocery store or whatever, and you can see somebody standing on the curb, like totally addicted to drugs, begging for money, right? And you know that person is experiencing extreme suffering, right? And yet it's like, in order to be able to exist in your life, you have to look away, right? You have to look away. Or you have to be like, no, I can't give you any money. Like, you have to avoid and ignore, and you feel yourself do it every time you see someone. And it might not be that scenario. Maybe you've gotten over that scenario, but there's some scenario in your life where you look away and you don't want to see the stuff that's going on in this world. And that's where the anxiety is coming from for real. That's where the depression is coming from. Because if we don't guarantee that everyone in our world has the opportunity to actually experience happiness in the real sense, in the sense that they're not having to stress on a daily basis about where their basic needs are whether their basic needs are going to be met, where it's going to come from, then that suffering, you're going to experience it too. It resonates through our entire world. You are going to experience some anxiety and stress and pressure because you know you could be doing more and you're not doing it. So investigate Technotutor, find out what we're doing. Like, become a part of something that matters. Like, ask yourself if you're doing something that matters, if you're doing something that actually has real practical value in this world, and you know it, and you're not experiencing any anxiety or pressure or depression or stress, and you can be self-honest about that. You don't have to be self-honest with me or honest with me. Just be self-honest. Like, really go and investigate. Look for yourself. But if you are experiencing some level of depression, anxiety, stress, and you know you could be doing more, find out what we're doing at TechnoTutor. Contact me, message me, talk to me. Like, let's start solving the real problems in this world and stop just ignoring it and stop looking away. Okay? All right, bye.